Okay, this is your Chapter 1 online lecture for Introduction to Social Work. One of the things that I want to start off with, this is a basic definition of what is social work. Social work, I want to emphasize this first point, is a professional activity. You'll hear quite a few people say that they're social workers when legally they are not. They are helping professions, but if you're not licensed, you should not actually call yourself a social worker in the same way that you shouldn't call yourself a doctor or a lawyer or any other profession. Okay, it is a licensed profession. One of the things that makes social work unique is that we can work with a variety of group sizes, from individuals all the way up to macro systems, including legislations and things like that. We also have our own set of values and goals that are unique to this profession. We'll go over those social work values later on in the first 3 chapters, along with the ethics and things like that. I want you to understand, whenever the book uses the term social welfare, they are using that term in a very clinical way. Whenever most people in the general population hear the word welfare, they think of government assistance to poor people. That's actually incorrect. Okay? Welfare is your society doing okay. Welfare in a general sense, though, is a very stigmatized term. It's of those people. Those people receive assistance. Those people are on welfare. Those people receive food stamps. Now, what's really strange about our system here in the United States, some types of welfare are stigmatized and some are not. If you receive food stamps, that is stigmatized. If you receive a student loan, which is still assistance from the government that many people don't pay back, or they seek legislation to minimize their paying back, typically not a stigmatized term. So we kind of play favorites as a society with government assistance in many ways. But social welfare is the nation's systems of programs, benefits, and service that help people meet our social needs, economic needs so that we can take care of ourselves money-wise, educational needs so that we can communicate and be prepared to enter the workforce and things like that, as well as health and safety needs. The book is very political. Okay, social work as a field is very political. I can't help that. We also live in one of the most conservative portions of the United States. That's the truth. We approach this as social workers because it takes money to help with people's problems, our capitalist system. That's just a fact. How do we get money? We pass legislation. We pass legislation by enacting or electing officials who will help us help other people. Some are conservative and some are liberal. The book uses some pretty generalized terms when dealing with conservative and liberal, but I want you to understand them. This is not an attack on anybody's political position. This is just the way things are seen, okay? All of this is about political ideology, though. Ideology is just a system of beliefs about what should be, how society should be, how humans are, and I should use quote marks around are, people's idea of human nature and things around that, how the government should run, how families should run, different things like that. Ideology, when people use that term, it's just a set of beliefs. And it's a set of beliefs that will justify any type of social arrangement, whether that social arrangement is fair or not. Okay? For a long time, the United States had an ideology that African Americans were supposed to be enslaved, and they believed that that's why they were on the planet. Okay? Many people could find verses in the Bible that would justify that system. They believed in the Bible, so they believed in slavery. Okay? Now, once again, I'm not saying that all people in today's world that believe in the Bible believe in that, but there are verses in the Bible dealing specifically with how to be a good slave and things like that. An ideology is just any set of beliefs, and all people have them. Okay? All people justify their own beliefs and their own actions with their own ideology. In general terms, conservatism is the philosophy that individually people are responsible for themselves and need very minimal government interference. Okay, I think this is a great idea. I wish more people were responsible for themselves. Whether they are or whether they're not, whether they can be or cannot be, that's very individualized depending on the person. Typically, conservatives will oppose change. They want things the way they used to be. That's why they're called conservatives. They're trying to conserve things in the manner that they are or the manner that they believe they used to be. Typically have a little bit more negative view of human nature than the liberals do. You'll see this in some general terms like spare the rod, spoil the child, and things like that. The book, I think, plays this a little bit too heavy-handed, but they usually do perceive that most people can take care of themselves. Liberalism is the philosophy that the government should be involved in social, political, and economic structures to protect people's rights. Believe that if the government is not watching out for people, then business and different structures will take advantage of people. I could give you examples of that. If there wasn't testing about safety measures, would workplaces become unsafe? They have in the past. Okay. If we didn't require testing for drugs, drug companies put out stuff that might not be as safe. Maybe. It's happened before. Okay. This is just the idea that we need to be able to protect people's rights. Liberalism typically is more progressive and is more fond of change, has a little bit more positive view of human nature, and they'll view the government as the best way to provide structure for people's opportunities, or at least the best structure that we have now. There are obviously other things that could be invented, but of the tools we have available to us now, most liberals feel that we should we should empower, is probably the best way to say that, the government to oversee some of these things to help us, to at least help equalize the playing field and let people not be taken advantage of. Radicalism, this is the political ideology that that the government and our system itself is beyond help, that we need to basically tear down the system. To be honest, there are radicals on both ends of the political spectrum. There are radical progressives and liberals, and there are radical conservatives who believe we should go back to 1920, 1930, remove people's different rights that different groups have had. Now, all of this is a matter of perspective, okay? Where you see things is highly individualistic. But radicals typically believe that we have to make fundamental changes in order for the system to be fair and equitable and let all people have a chance to be successful. How the different groups view individual behaviors. Conservatives typically believe each person is responsible for themselves. If somebody commits a crime, they chose to commit a crime. If they left school, they chose to flunk out of school. It's their responsibility. Liberals put a lot more emphasis on environmental factors influencing behavior. To use the same two examples, if somebody commits a crime, did they have limited legal opportunities to be successful? Or if somebody doesn't do well and flunks out of school, did they do that because they were required to work a job in order to have money, so they were splitting their time between school and working a job and things like that? It just looks a little bit bigger than just the individual. Both do believe in free will, but liberals typically believe the environment may give different people different options and different rewards. You think about if you know a student who is going to school and their parents are paying for their apartment and paying for their car and paying for their school, and then their job is to basically be a good student, that's a different college experience than someone who is taking out student loans. They're paying for their own apartment and they're paying for their own school, and they're working 2 jobs to do that. Their college experience is different. Typically, the view of the family, conservatives are very traditional. Look at the nuclear family, mom, dad, children, and will seek legislation to protect that particular view. Whether this deals with laws about adoption or ways to get more government assistance and things like that. Liberals are more accepting of different family models, whether that's a more communal model or single parent families or things like that. Typically, liberals would still favor a 2-parent model if at all possible, simply because if you involve children in it, you have at least two people rather than one in order to split the work between. When we look at the economy, typically conservatives feel that small government is better. You'll hear conservatives talk about limited government interference, limited regulation, and things like that. In today's world, we hear more about the effects of climate change. Okay, so conservatives are more inclined to say that climate change is false and that we need less government intervention about pollution and things like that, and monitoring factories and car emissions and things like that can harm business, which it probably does. Liberals would say, well, we need to still regulate this so that we have a healthy environment to live in. Now, the main way that the government receives money is through taxation, which is just redistribution of income. It takes money from us as earners and funds programs for that, to include things like parks, roads, welfare programs. Obviously, that's one of the smaller things. Military spending, everything that you see, libraries, everything that you see that is federally funded is funded through taxation of some sort. Now, different programs, both sides of the political spectrum will support voucher systems for different things, depending on what the voucher system is for. School vouchers I will take out of that for right now. But common voucher system is a food stamp program. Basically, the government gives people with limited income a card. They can use that to buy food. It still gives us control over what is being purchased and who. And we also need to look at who's benefiting for this. If we give poor people an extra $100 each to buy food with, and we do that for 1 million people, that's $100 million the government is giving to poor people. They are obviously benefiting, but we need to remember that they're not the only beneficiary of this. If they buy that food, they most likely buy it in a grocery store. So the grocery store is a middleman in this, and they have a markup, and so they're benefiting by this program. Farmers are selling more food. They are obviously benefiting by this program. That's the reason the food stamp program is run by the Department of Agriculture. The farmers are the ultimate beneficiary, the tail-end beneficiary of that particular program. Now, conservatives will say that the government favors minorities and the poor because there are certainly more programs to aid them. And that is absolutely true. There is a larger number of programs aimed at helping the poor. The liberals and the radicals will say the government favors the rich and powerful because there are more laws and regulations to aid them. People can Now, I want you to remember that both of these are correct depending on your perspective. In this sense, there's really no wrong way to view these other than saying that something's conservative when it's obviously liberal. But philosophically, both sides make valid points. Now, why do we care about these different perspectives? Different perspectives will lead to different definitions of a problem, also lead to different solutions. What should we do about it? Who should do it? Who's responsible for it? How much should we do? If we think about like education, let's say a school has underperforming students rather. Well, is that a school problem or is that a parent problem, or is that a family problem, or well, what should we do about it? Well, it depends on, did we define it as a school problem or as a family problem? How much should we do? Who should pay for it? Which is the ultimate catch for many of these different things. The different levels of education that the chapter sort of finishes up with. Your lowest level for social work that you can be licensed is a BSW. It is a licensed position. I would encourage all of you to complete your education and get that license. That license opens up a ton of entry-level positions. And once you're in a job, it's a lot easier to promote and make more money and things like that once you are there. You can progress beyond that and get an MSW, a Master's in Social Work. You get more training, usually in a specified field. It may be specifically in counseling, or some are specifically for, they will choose clinical work or administrative work, like if you wanted to run Department of Family Services or something like that. There is a PhD in social work, but usually the only folks that you will see this are college professors, because there's no license that goes up for a PhD. There is a license there is a LMSW that is a licensed master level social worker, but there's no level above that for a PhD social worker. Social service aides are a lot of people that do the work of social work, but they're not really social workers. This might be your entry-level position in a assisted living facility or something like that. What sets social work apart? First, we focus on sets of problems rather than typically individual problems. We target the client within their own environment. Typically, we want to go to them to see where the problem is. It's very different than psychology, where they bring you into their office, or medicine, where you go to the doctor's office. Social work would rather see you in your environment, because that's where you're surviving and where you're having trouble. They also act as advocates to help clients who cannot represent their own selves or their own interests because they lack the financial means to do so, or the intellectual means to do so, or they just don't have a way to speak up for themselves. We do have our own code of ethics. This will be covered in a later chapter. And we'll practice in partnership with the client, trying to empower the client. We want to make the client ultimately responsible for their own success or failure, to empower them to solve their own problems for themselves, if at all possible, the next time we encounter something. That is the end of this particular lecture.